Laura Blumenfeld, a Middle East analyst and senior fellow at the Philip Merrill Center for Strategic Studies. Good evening to you, Laura. Good to have you on the programme once again. I'd like to begin with those comments that we had from the UK's Development Minister today, who was saying that, in her view, Israel is using hunger as a weapon of war. We know that aid has been positioned in the Gaza Strip, but it hasn't been handed out, as far as we know at this stage. What do you think these kind of comments, this apparent growing international pressure, will mean for Israel's strategy in this conflict?
Yeah, I mean, we can all agree that a massive human tragedy has been unleashed by the Hamas attack on October 7th. The problem is how people are interpreting it. And in Israel, we're just running up against a wall. There's just a lack of empathy. When I speak to even the most kind of tender-hearted senior officials in Israel, security officials who I really have gone to over the years and talked to them about the human side on both sides of the conflict, what they say is very simple. With their yellow hostage pins, attached to their lapels, they say Hamas is Gaza and Gaza is Hamas. And when I follow up with the question, do you mean that the children of Hamas, the Gaza children, are also Hamas? And what they say is that it's Hamas that's hoarding the aid and they're responsible. So it's very hard for Americans, as we look for ways to connect, there's always the moral connection, but I don't think that there's an alignment right now. There's also an economic connection that in the past, Israel and the United States or presidents have been able to connect on. And with Trump, that just doesn't go. I mean, it's a gold-plated beeper from Netanyahu. That was the present that he gave the president. And Qatar is offering a gold-plated plane. So the one area where I do see alignment, and it's not in Gaza, it's actually on Iran, where they're kind of hitting their groove between Israel and the United States. It looks like they can agree on this red line of enrichment. Iran is rejecting it. The United States and Israel are aligned. So as always, I think Netanyahu will benefit if he pivots away from Gaza, show some kind of flexibility, and then go back to kind of bigger fish to fry, as he's always put it, which is the war against Iran.
Well, you mentioned that apparent resistance from the upper echelons or from the Israeli government. But if you take a look at the situation among Israeli society, I'm curious here because we had these comments from the Prime Minister Netanyahu today saying that he could only certainly say that there are 20 living hostages in Gaza. And I just wonder whether that could add to the pressure that we are seeing right now, the fact that the numbers of those who remain alive, sadly, is dwindling.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. It goes to the heart of the matter, because when you ask the Israeli population, 2/3 of the Israelis will say, end the war to release the hostages. They favor the hostages, 20 lives over, the defeat of Hamas, which is an important priority for Israel. They really see their soldiers, because that's who's there right now. The 20 hostages are all fighting men, men of fighting age. Everybody sees them as their own sons. And Netanyahu will never have the upper hand. It doesn't matter how many. He killed Yahya Sinwar almost a year ago, the leader of Hamas. Last week, he killed his brother. He could kill 6 generations of Sinwars. He won't have the upper hand until he releases the hostages.
And just on the topic of what we saw on the West Bank today, the IDF saying that it had fired warning shots at diplomats, including European diplomats, who they say went off the approved route. What do you think that says just about the level of current tension there as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's tension everywhere. And I think that one of the problems, if we just kind of scroll back or kind of zoom out, as we say in America, you should take Trump seriously, but never literally. And I think part of the problem is Netanyahu heard this Gaza plan, this kind of fantasy ethnic cleansing of a Palestinian kind of voluntarily departing the territory. Netanyahu, I think he's finally come up with something that he thinks he can deliver for President Trump, right? It's all about what you can give him, what kind of present on a platter. So this idea of we'll take Gaza, the United States will just, quote, have it. They've looked toward Canada, toward Panama, toward Greenland. They want to expand their territory. So that's what's happening in Gaza. But I think there's also an eye toward the West Bank. Finally, can they realize their dreams? Again, this is kind of fantasy tooth fairy Trump, which is so dangerous. Can Israel finally realize their dreams of expanding the territory and making the West Bank what they call Judea and Samaria? back into this kind of biblical homeland. So I think you're seeing a little bit of that there, and that's why there's some, kind of fired shots, loose shots, including when a diplomatic convoy was there, although the Israelis did own that mistake and they apologized.
Laura Blumenfeld, a Middle East analyst and a senior fellow at the Philip Merrill Center for Strategic Studies. Always good to have your expertise. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.